Jeff, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. We're going live here in just a second. Stand by.
Yeah, I just saw the Leak Project is live on air pop-up.
Yeah, here we are. We're live now. All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have Jeffrey Daugherty with us, the Christian whistleblower, ex-minister, over 20 years with the church. He's even been a part of exorcisms, and we're going to talk about a few of the Vatican's dirty little secrets and several other religious institutions that make a killing off of you, ladies and gentlemen, after they hypnotize you. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about Dianetics. And I'm going to pick Jeff's brain big time about L. Ron Hubbard, who he was as a person outside of the CIA front that I feel has infiltrated the church. Maybe it was already infiltrated at the beginning. Maybe he was doing Navy intel with the military at the beginning, but it certainly seems like now more than ever, there's a lot more control in that institution. But first of all, what is up with the Vatican? If you go to the Vatican, you can see this bizarre statue of Jesus where it looks like he's got a serpent head, like a snake head. And Jeff brought something up off the air that we're going to talk about right now, about what else this looks like. So, Jeff, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great, Rex. Glad to be with you. Always a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for getting up. I know that you got about 3 hours of sleep. You do more podcasts than me, so I don't even know how that's possible, but you do. And that's awesome. So, tell the audience what you saw and the epiphany that you had with this image.
Well, this is completely half-baked. I just mentioned it to you because I haven't had a chance to really study it out or get too much in depth of it. It actually just came to me a few minutes before we went on air. But I jotted down a couple notes, and the note I put down was perpetual patsy, sold soul for Jesus gig, ? Being killed and sacrificed over and over, ? transubstantiation, ? So my thought was, and then you show me this image, from my research, the real Christ, the guy that was the Word, that was an Elohim and became flesh on earth, I think for 3-4 years, at least there in Jerusalem, he was not crucified. And that's pretty clear within the writings of the Gospel of John. The person that was crucified was called Thomas Didymus, or the twin. Looked like Jesus, he was a good patsy, and he got crucified. And I think, and I've written about this in some of my books, that they ran a huge super psyop mind game on him to where they actually warped him into believing that he was, the Son of God and a Savior figure. And what came to me just recently was that this guy, this poor bastard that we're looking at this picture here, this patsy, this Didymus, this twin, that he may have actually signed some type of a contract with them, entered into some type of agreement to be this Messiah figure. And is he, Rex, and your great audience, being crucified over and over and over again? Is he being harvested over and over and over again? Is he in this perpetual loop of sacrifice that happens every time there's a Catholic Mass or a Christian communion? And when you look at this picture, I don't know about you, but it looks for the world to me like a dude trapped in a soul farm that's being cannibalized infinitum.
Man, you want to hear something even more spooky? Is this is actually connecting an experience that I had that I've shared with you and the audience about how I felt like I was Archon food once, like how I felt like I was literally a part of some type of entity that was feeding off of me. And then all of a sudden I was connected to other people and I felt like I was in a stadium and I could only be allowed to move when it was my turn. And I'm looking at this image and I'm kind of feeling the same thing. And it's pretty spooky because I certainly don't believe everything that I hear from the Far Side Institute, far from it, but there's certain times that I feel that they hit the nail on the head. And there was this one, and I love Dick Allgaier and Daz Smith. Those guys are great, really nice people, very, very, very good at remote viewing, probably some of the best in the world. Courtney Brown, last time I had him on the show, he said some things that really kind of made me go, really, dude? But, and it wasn't about, it was about the way that, how do I put it? Like, he basically said that he lied to them and lied to other people about about these doing these sessions because people couldn't know what they were looking at until afterwards. And then he made it sound like if you were a white person, then you shouldn't be into remote viewing anymore, because now it needs to be for other people. And first of all, who cares what color you are? I mean, it was just bizarre the way you go back and listen to the podcast. You'll know what I'm talking about. Like, even people left comments like, what's wrong with Courtney, man? Where's he going with this? I think he was just trying to reach a different audience, because a lot of people, I guess, that are into remote viewing and stuff like that, I guess, have white skin. Heck, I don't know. I mean, I figured there were people of all skin color that liked remote viewing, but it was just a real bizarre interview. And I'm not trying to knock the guy by any means, but why would you say that? Oh yeah, I lied to him. And then anyway, so yeah, let's get into.
Sounds like the Apostle Paul. I caught you by guile. I lied to you to get you in, and now I got you. And just a thought popped in my head. If you look at this picture, think back to the movie poster of Constantine.
Right, and real quick, the reason I brought up Farsight Institute is they did a remote viewing session on Jesus, and it wasn't it wasn't Jesus that actually died. It was somebody else, exactly like what you said. That's why I brought up Farsight Institute.
I love people that agree with me, Rex. Feel free to bring it up anytime.
So with that being said, Constantine, man, that was a serious battle as well. And you were you were a minister, so you know the secrets and stuff like that to get people into that hypnotic state. So if you would, for the audience, talk about some of those dirty little secrets that churches use to get people into that mind control state to where they want to give more money up to the church.
Right. And, that has to be stated that it's not, every single church that's doing it, because to be frank with you, a lot of them don't have the training and don't have the expertise to do it. So you may go to, second, third, fourth, fifth Baptist church, down the street that's got 30 or 40 people, and you might not experience this. But if you go to any church that's probably more than 200 or 300 people, you're going to notice the same exact formula that is being played out on every service. And the reason it's being played out is because it's very, very effective at bringing people into a stage of trance. And it doesn't mean like they're automatons, they can't control themselves, but it's a light state of trance, which it makes people highly susceptible to suggestion. And it also creates a huge group think, and it's all focused on the vibes that the ministers and the worship team really want to put across. And it starts, from the time you walk into the building. The colors are very similar. The setups are very similar. You've got, beautiful surroundings. You've got everything set just so, and it starts. I mean, this is a good example right here. It kind of draws you right to the platform. You've got the music going as you walk in, and the praise and worship service really is the thing that sets the table for them to start eating their energetic meal off of you. Because you go in, and actually King David, who I think there's some decent evidence might have been a golem. But in any way, King David wrote, you enter into his gates with thanksgiving. So they always start you off, Rex, clapping your hands, you're juking, you're jiving, you're dancing around, you're having a good time. You enter the gates with thanksgiving, and then you move into praise. They step it down just a notch, and it's not so much, bouncing around anymore. There's not so much dancing. You're kind of swaying, and you're moving a little bit deeper into trance, and you're singing the songs that are a little bit slower. And then they drop you down into worship. Thanksgiving, praise, and they drop you into worship. And worship is we've got our eyes closed, we've got our hands raised, we're deep into this light trance now, and we're weaving and we're singing, and that whole, you can just feel that energy, and you can feel that, people call it getting under the spout where the glory comes out, having your Holy Ghost Cheerios, and you get there and you just feel it. And the guys that do it really good, the guys that do it really well, they'll bring you to that place, your thanksgiving, your praise, your worship. And then as soon as people are still worshiping, they'll usually walk up to the microphone, and that's when they'll start saying the most important thing they want you to know. That's when they'll take care of the most important part of business. And 99.9% of the time in the big churches, Joel Osteen style, all the way down to 200-300 members, what comes after Thanksgiving, praise, and worship? comes the offering. It's time for money, money. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, pay up. Your sins will be forgiven. This week, you better pay a little bit more because you were kind of bad last weekend.
And I saw there's a great parody website. It's called Babylon Bee. And I made a funny little video. It said, church puts ushers on commission, income goes up 40%.
Nice. What do you think about all these ancient tablets and scriptures that go all the way back ancient Mesopotamia? Like earlier today, I was showing this tablet that showed these giant reptilian dudes eating babies and eating pigs, and like they were picking up pigs like you would pick up a football that was about the same size to them as well. I mean, they were just huge. And this tablet is thousands of years old. And I wonder, like, were they here first? Were they here before us? And if they were, maybe that's why this Anunnaki manipulation that took place on us, they don't like it. They never liked this in the first place. So I don't know, man. I'm really starting to question more and more every day with all this information that presents itself about these reptilian beings. And I mean, just look at the inside of the Vatican, for goodness sakes. It looks like a reptilian, like the inside of a reptile head, like a snake head. And they're found throughout the world. The Chinese, in Asian culture, in Middle Eastern culture, in Greece, in Rome. There's definitely an influence there.
Absolutely. In fact, my last book was called Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods. And it talks about this fact that the reptilian mythos, if you will, is ubiquitous in all of the great creation myths and in all of the ancient religions. And my question was, well, why isn't it in the Bible? And once you begin to look at Genesis in the original languages, you find out that, guess what? Boom, the reptilian mythos is highly present in the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis even shows that there was an upright reptilian hominid being created, wait for it, before Adam and Eve. So the first creation on this earth of a hominid humanoid type being was a upright reptile called in the scriptures the majestic serpent.
Well, and with the way we see the Vatican designed now, with the way that the serpent influence has been permeated throughout history, throughout cultures, does that mean that the serpents still control things at the top levels? Does that mean that here's what I think. And you know what? This last interview that I guess I was just talking to myself. It wasn't really an interview. I was doing a podcast. I was interviewing myself. Hey, Rex. Hey, buddy. So Ozzy, there was this, I was talking about the serpent archons and the DNA, and then I was linking it to Resident Evil and the T virus. And then I was thinking about bacteriophage, how they will actually create genetically designed viruses, spray it on meats and shellfish and stuff to get rid of the E. coli. And what happens is the viruses will literally release their seed. They will hook up to these bacteria, and then they'll spit out into the bacteria and then grow a whole bunch of themselves, self-replicate, and kill the bacteria. Well, there is a T4 virus. It's called the T4 model is what they call it. And it's literally patented. Most foods that have it don't even have to label it. It's considered something that doesn't need to be labeled because it's considered all natural, which is bizarre. But to make a long story short, they call it a T4 bacteriophage. T4 is the same virus in Resident Evil that turns everybody into zombies. Then you've got the Will Smith movie. What was that came out where I Am Legend. I Am Legend, where they cured cancer with a genetically designed virus, but then at the same time that turned people into zombies.
Good news, bad news.
Yeah, so it's like we're at the cusp right now where they can create. And by the way, the HIV virus looks almost identical under a microscope to the bacteriophage that is sprayed on cold cuts, on meats, on sea fish, on shellfish, etc. And you don't even know it, ladies and gentlemen. That you hear about the mad cow disease and stuff like that, where people's brains start eating themselves. The brain starts getting eaten by some weird fungus or something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it could be some rogue bacteriophage. So maybe this Archon interface, where am I going with this? Maybe this Archon interface that could have permeated through not only Enki and Enlil and the Anunnaki that manipulated us with their DNA. So therefore we would be infected as well with this archon type interface, this serpent archon. Maybe it's something similar to bacteriophage. Like maybe our DNA is the archon.
Wow. Maybe. And, just from maybe more of a less biological take on it and more of a energetic spiritual take. In Genesis 1:21, it talks about the King James says the great whales, but if you get down in the original Greek, it's the majestic serpent. The majestic serpent, that upright humanoid reptilians created in Genesis 1:21. Man's not created down until Genesis 1:27. We don't know how many thousands of years potentially are between Genesis 1:21 and 1:27, and these majestic serpents were a being like we were originally created, with great spiritual abilities, able to take physical form, able to not take physical form, able to bilocate, able to go without I always forget the word that you're in one place and boom, you switch to another one. But these guys, shape shifting, able to shape shift. Jesus shape shifted in the Bible. So these reptilians, Rex, they were created first, and who knows how many thousands of years head start they have on us to develop their shape shifting and their spiritual, energetic tomfoolery, and not to mention the fact that they never got themselves conned into a meat suit like we're in now. So from a purely energetic, from a purely spiritual, from a purely, mind control ability standpoint, they're probably far, far advanced to us. I mean, we're just now in this day and age learning to be able to get out of these bodies and realize our true spiritual essence. So the reptilian creatures are way ahead of us. And I'm not saying that I agree with everything David Icke says, but I'll tell you what, I'm a lot less incredulous about a lot of his work now than I was a month ago.
Well, I mean, I remember reading David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret, over 10 years ago, and that book just blew my mind, especially for 10 years ago. And it really freaked me out too, because he connected many of the organizations that you would think would be there for the people, many churches and institutions that are supposed to be looking for missing children and helping kids that are, runaways and stuff like that, when in reality, at least according to this book and the connections that he put together, it's the exact opposite. I mean, it made you think, my goodness, if I have kids, I don't even want my kids to go to a public school, because if they're in a yearbook picture, then there could be some psychopath that could have access to that picture and be like, oh, I want that one for this ritual.
There's a lot of dark things in this world that we live in, Rex. That's why I'm glad that there's people like you and my efforts to try to bring as much light and good and help and as much information to let people at least know that there is a battle going on, and we can at least try to prepare ourselves and do what we can to offset this onslaught of just evil, dastardly, horrible, transhuman trying to destroy us as not only beings, but spiritual beings. And thank God there is the Leak Project and other people like you that are out here trying to help us at least have a fighting chance.
Well, I appreciate that. And it wouldn't be nearly as much fun without you guys. If I had to, when I used to have my career, I was talking about this kind of stuff during lunch breaks and stuff like that, or else I'd be driving my boss crazy by talking about it while we were waiting for our next client or whatever. So it's just, I've always been this way. And here's an image of that bacteriophage, Jeff. And this stuff, literally, these are viruses that will attach to the bacteria. These type of viruses are designed to attack the E. coli virus. So their justification is they spray it on stuff that's got E. coli, it eats the E. coli, and they don't even need to label it. Like, there's thousands of products that have this stuff on it. You could be going to a fast food restaurant. Let's say you're going to a place like Subway. They've got those cold cuts, and you're eating this stuff, and you don't even realize it. Well, my question is, what happens if it's tweaked just a little bit? What happens if they tweak it to where, if, once again, instead of it going after the E. coli, it goes after your neurological system, your nervous system, or the actual T cells that protect your immune system in your body, like the HIV virus. And I think the HIV virus absolutely was made in a laboratory. I don't think that thing was was from somebody having sex with a monkey. And if you look at the way that it looks like, it looks almost identical to this. And it has the same type of, it does the same thing. It will latch on to the cell, and then it will spew itself into that cell, and then take the cell's actual matter and then rewrite it to where it's copies of itself. That sounds like gray goo. That sounds like nanotech. You look at a cold cell, or I mean, not a cold cell. You look at a cold virus, and it has a 5-pointed star in the center of the virus. It doesn't look natural either. Even so the cold virus, think about that. Was the cold virus made in a laboratory for these psychopath pharmaceutical companies that at one point were more eugenicists than pharmaceutical companies, thinking that they can play God and just create the nasties of the nasties, and people will accept it, and then they've got the cure. They can control the narrative. That's what they want to do. They want to control the freaking narrative, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, and maybe there's some type of, the Archon interface is literally something like this bacteriophage. What are your thoughts?
And let's take one more step down the rabbit hole, Rex, and we've got to get to the place where we become more cognizant of our diets. We've got to get to the place where we're more cognizant of what we put into our bodies, because who knows how much of this stuff that you're bringing out that they're putting into our bodies. And here's another one step down, Rex. How much of it lays dormant until AT&T and all the rest of the tech companies can roll out their cell phone technology, which, guess what, is going to send energy right through your skeletal bone structure so you can unlock your door without a key. Isn't that great? And who knows what things lying dormant within our system that we've been filled with are they going to be able to activate when they help us open our door with just a touch and not a key? So you won't have to carry keys, but oh, by the way, you won't have to carry original thoughts anymore either, because we're going to take you over and you're going to be an automaton. You will be assimilated. They want us to think resistance is futile, but it's not. But we have to start taking responsibility. We have to start thinking. We have to start, stop going through the drive-through, and we've really got to become more cognizant of what we're putting in our bodies.
Must lick master's boots, get flu shot. I'm afraid of the unicorn virus. Please sell me, consume more.
So like these bacteriophage things that could be in our bodies right now, like just waiting to have some type of activation code or something like that. I wonder if maybe that if you're, let's say, creating a Frosted Flake type cereal in China, and they're like, we don't really like those Americans that much anyway. Why don't we beta test what happens if we put these viruses disguised as a sweetener in here? And then we can track them also to see where they go after they eat it, what their daily habits are going to be like. Like they've got microchips. Hitachi has these microchips that are as thin as a human hair, and you could put 1,000 of them within a matter of a few inches, or
I've
even
heard
like
you talk about those.
They're tiny, and I've seen the images, and these are old. These are like 4 years old, and it makes me think of the film Circle that I fell asleep watching last night, which is pretty good, but it didn't keep me excited after the part to where I was able to figure out the whole movie in a few minutes. But to make a long story short, they come up with these cameras that they want to have all around the world. And these cameras are like high definition cameras. They're about the price of a pair of jeans. And, you don't need a license for it, nothing. And it all hooks up to the cloud. And then it's got all these sensors on it. So it'll sense the atmosphere and all this other stuff. And they want to track the whole world live, real time with all these things. And I think to myself, well, that's kind of a barbaric compared to the stuff that they're already doing, like with these Hitachi chips. Like they're telling us about, oh, we're going to come out with it. They've already done it. And it's at a scale that's so much smaller than what they're showing us. Because that camera is about, I don't know, maybe it's a couple inches in length in that film. But imagine that, Jeff. Imagine everybody being able to go buy this camera that's high definition. They can put it anywhere. They can get it for a pair of jeans. And then they can just spread 30 of them. Talk about like the ultimate voyeur's wet dream. What happens then?
Dude, have you noticed at this picture that's up on the screen right now, the creepy kind of gray alien face that's in it?
Yeah, it's the micro version of the gray.
Take me to your leader.
Oh my.
So what do you think about that?
So much of the stuff is dropped into our conscious, through the media and through the Easter eggs they drop. And it's always amazing to me that they still have to drop some truth on us, every now and then as well, to kind of let us know that they know, or if it's just part of the ritual, I'm not sure. But there's no doubt that we're being prepared for an even greater level of surveillance, and an even greater level of invasion into our private lives. And there's no doubt that they will not stop short until they do have, cameras on us 24/7, 365. They won't stop short until they know everything that's going on. I mean, they really want to push us to a Hunger Games type society. And they may just be sitting back saying, well, they went for that. Let's see if they'll go for this. And it's like, how far will we let them push us? And who knows what the answer to that is, Rex, as long as we keep getting good TV and fast internet and the drive-through gets me through quick, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing too that I find fascinating.
What do you say? Just don't let my 650-pound life come on late.
Yeah,
it better be on time.
So you have another thing that I really want to know about is, I remember back in the early 80s as a kid, a little kid growing up and seeing Dianetics, commercial. And I was like, what is that? I always thought it was fascinating, but I never read it. And then now anytime people bring up Hubbard, like, oh man, Hubbard, isn't he the one that was having sex magic with Crowley and Parsons and then made up Scientology and worked with the CIA? And I mean, all that might be true. I don't know. But what is up with Dianetics? You've read Dianetics, haven't you?
I did. I've read Dianetics. I've actually read 18 of Hubbard's books. In Scientology, they got this thing. It's called the 18 Basic Books, and it literally is 18 books, and I have read them. And strangely enough, the set of books I have came from Tom Cruise, who gave it to one of his assistants, and I bought them from her sister. So anyway, kind of an interesting little 6 degrees of Tom Cruise.
I like Tom Cruise. I think he's a good actor. So
I think it's a tremendous actor. I think Oblivion was one of the great films, very, very underrated. I think the new Mummy movie was strong. I really enjoyed it. And the last Mission Impossible was really strong too. So I think he's a good actor. And I think, one thing I'll say this for Tom Cruise, the guy, if he would just, when they ask him about religion, if he would just politely say, you know what, I'm an actor, I don't really talk about that, that's my private life, that would have been so much easier for him. But if they ask him about religion, he's got to talk about Scientology. He's got to talk about how he thinks it'll change the world. He has the courage of his convictions at the expense of, every time he opens his mouth about it, millions of dollars literally fly out of his mouth. So I at least respect him for having the courage of his convictions.
Absolutely. And Oblivion was one of my favorite films. And the underlying theme of that movie was off the charts. And it really makes me wonder, the Black Pyramid, harvesting the earth, tricking humans into thinking they're fighting an alien race when they're fighting themselves, and then the clones from the machine. And it's just incredible. I wonder if something like that could be going on right now, just not to that extreme.
Absolutely. I had the same thoughts in watching that film, and I thought it was one of those times where, for whatever reason, Hollywood is dropping some truth on us. And most people, they just go into that, the same kind of trance that you go into at church. Movies are designed to put you in that same kind of light trance. Going to the Yankees game or the Cowboys game, it's designed to put you in that same kind of light trance. These archons, these aliens, whatever you want to call them, they have refined their techniques. It's not just religion anymore they're working through. They're working through, gambling, sports, politics, anything that puts people in a herd mentality, anything that gets them into that light hypnotic trance where you can literally they put little connectors on you, spiritual kind of tentacles, if you will. And I'm not saying don't go to the movies. I'm not saying don't be involved in politics, but I am saying keep your wits about you. Don't allow yourself to be drawn into the groupthink and the trance if you're going to go and do those things.
Absolutely. Use it for you. Don't let it be used against you. And that's what I do. I love watching movies. I love watching films, TV shows, and I will take a lot of the subliminal programming and use that for knowing what their future agendas are or what they want to happen in the future. To give you an example, if you have seen The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where it came out, I think in 2000, right around 2000 timeframe, maybe early 2001, and it's all about cloning. And the smart appliances that were in that film, like the smart fridge and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't out in the public yet. All that kind of stuff is out right now.
Absolutely.
17 years ago. Go back 17 years and watch that film, and the cloning technologies like plug and play bodies and stuff like that. How far advanced are they with the cloning technologies? I've wondered that. I don't know if you can just go download your consciousness into a new body and be like, boom, look, I'm 25 again. But maybe. I mean, I don't think so. They probably got cloning technologies where you have to, you're starting from a embryo or something like that. They just add a little bit more serpent DNA or something, give you a snake head, but kind of like that statue. But let's talk about Dianetics, man. I want to get into that. What is it?
Well, Dianetics started, and it's hard to, once the media and, once the dominant social paradigms have identified something as being X, and they've been telling you for years and years, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. It's very hard to step outside of that conditioning and look at something objectively. But Dianetics basically was at its beginning, and we're talking, late 50s is when Hubbard was getting it started. And Dianetics was just another thing like power positive thinking with Norman Vincent Peale. Dianetics was just another thing like Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill. Dianetics was just another thing with, like W. Clement Stone. It was just, Hubbard was one of this new group of these self-help gurus that were coming out. And it was nothing more than another school of thought on how to control your mind, how to rid yourself of unhealthy habits, how to improve your communication habits, and how to live, a more successful and happy life. That's how it started out. It was just another self-help technology. So at the very base and core, if we get objective about it and remove all of the emotion and all of the hype, Dianetics was just another self-help strategy system that was rolled out along with a lot of other ones back in the late 50s.
When you read it, like if you go back and think about the different chapters and stuff like that, which part of the book stood out most to you?
Well, the one thing that stands out to me is because I read Dianetics after having done a lot of research. I probably only read Dianetics maybe 5 years ago. And the thing that I saw was, and I also was studying about Hubbard himself, and this is a guy that went all over the world 2-3 times. He commanded 3 naval vessels. I mean, the guy was definitely off the charts IQ, hanging out with literal rocket scientists, hanging out with highly thelemic spiritual type individuals. And what I noticed from reading through Dianetics is that there's very, very little original material. There's not many things that L. Ron Hubbard actually thought up or made up on his own. What he was an expert at was gleaning from other systems of thought. He would take something from the East, something from the West, something from the North, something from the South. And he would put all of these, he cobbled together all of these different spiritual technologies, I call them, and then would put his own names on them. So Dianetics really is a compilation of, probably 30 years of study on his part, picking and choosing what he felt to be the most effective spiritual techniques or success techniques that he had come across in all of his travels, rebranded under the Dianetics name, changing a little bit of the vocabulary to put it into his system. And that was the main thing that got me was, hey, this is nothing new. This is just a lot of other stuff that's been cobbled together. And I'm a guy, and I take heat for this. If it works, I will use it. I am pragmatic in that regard. If it's something that works, it's something that helps, it's a technology that can be employed to improve your life, I will use it as long as I know that it's not, going against somebody else's intention and there's nothing nefarious about it. But I don't care if L. Ron Hubbard thought it up or not, or I don't care if L. Ron Hubbard stole it from somebody else or borrowed it from somebody else. If it's a spiritual technology that is practical and that will work for me, if it can teach me to be 3 feet behind my head at will, I'll use it.
And for the listeners, Jeff, give us some self-help pieces out of that book. Like, what are some things that you have done or that you do that derive from the pages of that book, or that are in the pages of that book?
Okay.
You would say, hey, check this out.
One of the biggest things is this thing that he talks about called discovering your great basic purpose. Why are you here? What are you meant to do? What are you supposed to do? When you were a little kid, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and somebody said to you, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was that answer? And how does that compare to what you're doing now? Hubbard was trying to teach a concept of, hey, you've got to find and discover your great basic purpose, and you'll never truly be happy until you do discover what it is, embrace what it is, burn your bridges, burn your ships in the harbor, and go full force towards whatever your great basic purpose was. Now, if I had said that, I'd get amens from everywhere, but as soon as you attach the name Hubbard to it, that Hubbard wrote it, and all of a sudden, oh, that's bad stuff. Another thing, Hubbard brought out this concept of games. People that are successful in what they do, whether it's Donald Trump in real estate, Bill Gates in high technology, or Tom Cruise in acting, people that are successful in what they're doing, they are playing, Rex. They see it as a game. They see it as a contest. They see it as fun. They don't take it super seriously. And Hubbard, again, where he got this from was not original. But if you put those two things together, your great basic purpose, and, like Bill Hicks said, life is a ride. If you really understand and approach life as a game and as play, and if you're involved in your great basic purpose, man, your life is incredibly better than it is if you're living any other way. And that's just two little tidbits out of that book that we would all say they're great, but because Hubbard's name gets attached to them, all of a sudden they're evil. And I think that's one of the reasons why Hubbard is looked at as such a prize, because obviously there's a lot of people in this world that don't want us discovering our great basic purpose, and they don't want us learning how to play and embrace our inner child. So that's just two things, and I'll shut up now.
Well, I do want to say something just because I'm reading through the comment section here. A lot of people are bringing up Aleister Crowley and Hubbard and Parsons and their interesting relationships that they had. One thing that
that's one way to put it.
Yeah, it is. And Crowley, at least according to Colin James here, he's saying Crowley mantra, do what thou will, was a bastardization of the mantra. Now, it depends on how you look at it, because if you think do what thou wilt means do whatever the hell you want and there's no repercussions, and if there is, so what? Well, I don't think that's what he meant. A lot of people look at it that way. So when I think of do what thou wilt, or at least the original term before Aleister Crowley was born, that term was used, do what thou wilt. Now, what does that mean? My opinion is, at least before Crowley's time, that means do what your will is, do what your purpose is. And if you do what you're supposed to do, what God made you for, how much better does it get than that? So what you just said about the L. Ron Hubbard connection in Dianetics, what are you here for? If it reminds me of the planets and the orbits that the planets are in, and unless there's like this rogue planet that's off track, everything is harmonious and works together. So when you hear about a psychopath that goes and kills people or does sick shit, and then I just do whatever I want to, I do what thou wilt. I don't think that's do what thou wilt, at least what the term was originally used for. They're taking it and they're spinning it and using it for their own sick needs. What's your take on that?
Yeah, neither one of us is going to sit here and try to say that Aleister Crowley wasn't a creepy dude, because he was a creepy dude. He had a lot of weird stuff going on. But he talks about it in his books. He writes about how he did blood rituals with little children and stuff like that. So, and a lot of his stuff was just hype. He was writing it to make himself seem to be a character. But at any rate, he still did a lot of crazy stuff. But that in the Thelemic school of thought, that saying is, do what thou wilt, that shall be the whole of the law. And what it really means, if you get into the Thelemic books and that school of thought is, if you're doing your great basic purpose, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, then you're embracing your thing, and then you're not bothering or interfering or trying to limit somebody else. So it's really a twist on what we would call the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Only the Thelemic people, like Crowley put it as, be so busy doing what you're supposed to do that you don't have time to worry about what Jeff is supposed to be doing. And that way we all are doing what we're supposed to do, and it all works well together. So in its real best, highest form, it does mean do your do, let the other people do their do, and we'll all get along together. But it is twisted by a lot of people to say, oh, he just meant do whatever the hell you want. That's not what he meant, but that doesn't mean that's not what some people that embrace that theology do.
Exactly. And I don't quote me on this, but I remember reading in Aleister Crowley's book 4, which he called his magnum opus. It was like a combination of 4 books compiled into one canon. He talked about how his previous lives, he made up for all the karma that he was going to have to use in his most previous life. So take that the way you want to. I think that's very interesting how he said that, because it makes you wonder, like, what kind of stuff he actually did. And, it's like he was building up karma previous lives for something that he had to do this life. I find that very, very interesting. And, he talked about being the prophet of the new age. And there's, certainly the guy was brilliant on so many levels, yet so tormented on so many other levels. It's very interesting. It'd be neat to see somebody with that caliber be just from the light.
It really would. It really would.
Where are they at?
And for the record, Hubbard and Crowley never actually met. They probably talked on the phone a lot, but Hubbard, as far as the Thelemic part and the magic with the K part, he was working with Jack Parsons down there in SoCal, and Jack Parsons had met Aleister Crowley. And interestingly enough, Jack Parsons wrote Crowley a letter, and I've actually seen copies of the letter where Parsons says that L. Ron Hubbard was the most thelemically minded man that he'd ever met. So Hubbard never met Crowley. Hubbard and Parsons hung out. And again, just for the record, just to make things straight, L. Ron Hubbard's role in most of the magic, the Babylon working and all the stuff that Parsons was doing, his main job was just to be the chronicler. So he didn't really do a whole lot of the workings himself. He just watched them and wrote it all down. And you think maybe he was taking notes and thinking, oh, I might be able to use that a little bit later in some other kind of a thing. So I don't even know if he was really you would call him a real magician. He was their chronicler. He was their guy, their scribe, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Tell us more about what you know about him and Parsons and some of this, the mystery behind that era.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jack Parsons, of course, was the guy that founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And in all practical reality, Jack Parsons was the father of NASA. No Jack Parsons, no solid fuel rocket booster, no, going to the moon if we ever did go, or going anywhere else. But so Jack Parsons was NASA, and Jack Parsons had this mansion down in Southern California, and it was kind of a gathering place for, I mean, really, it was kind of a gathering place for weirdos like us, all these people that were outside the norm, and we're talking about, alternate forms of spirituality and alternate forms of reality. They would kind of go and hang out over at Jack's place. It wasn't just anybody. It was people that had, reached a certain level of society. And Hubbard was, one of the most successful sci-fi writers, at the time. He still holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most words written. He still owns the Guinness Book of World Records for most languages his work being translated into. And he was hanging out with guys like, Heinlein and Asimov and all these guys. And most of those guys said that Hubbard was smarter than they were. But at any rate, So these guys would all go hang out with Parsons, and they would talk about this stuff. And you know how it is. Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard kind of hit it off. And, they were guys that probably didn't have all of the filters that normal people have. And where most people would stop and say, oh, I don't know, man, I can't go there. These guys would ask, why not? And they got it in their head that they could help Crowley bring this dude, into our reality, into our dimension that he'd been trying to get in here that couldn't get in here. And so these two guys, Parsons from a technological and magical point of view, and Hubbard, who was one of the first people in the United States trained on nuclear technology, by the way, from his Navy years, and him working from his angle, these two guys decide, you know what? We think that we can, instead of doing it in a spiritual way, we think we could actually open a portal in the time-space continuum and allow this dude to get through that way. And so these two goofy bastards go out to this place called Devil's Canyon there in Southern California with all of their workings and their mathematics, and they actually succeed in opening up a portal, and this thing comes blasting through this portal, knocks them down. It gets away. It's not what they thought it was going to be. And it just happens to be, Rex, very coincidentally, that was maybe 4 months before a little thing called the Roswell incident.
There was a ton of flying saucer reports around that same time. And what you just said reminds me of the film Life at the very end of that movie. And spoiler alert, folks, wait 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. This entity that they find on Mars that starts out as a single cell ends up killing the whole crew. And they think that that's what killed life on Mars. And guess where it makes it at the end of the film? It makes it to Earth. So what you just said right there made me think of that.
Rex, I think those guys opened a portal that allowed something to come through, or created the technology that allows things to get through. And I think those two goofy bastards started this whole UFO avalanche that we've seen from that time until now.
My question is, if they open that up, and we know about Lamb and the communication that Aleister Crowley supposedly had with Lamb, this entity that looks exactly like the ET on the dollar bill that has the elongated skull. So if they were responsible for that, and you said that entity got away, like, did you have any more information on that entity that pushed them and got away?
No, their writings basically end where they successfully opened the portal and this thing blasted through, like the proverbial bat out of hell, and they barely got a look at it. It was just gone. And that was, again, coincidentally or not, right, just months before the avalanche and the breakthrough of all the UFO, ET sightings here, at least in the United States. So yeah, they did something that they did something that they didn't have any control over, and where it went after that, neither one of them really knows. So they basically let something out, and they don't know what they let out. And I think maybe we don't even totally know what they let out, even to today.
Do you know much about the Moon Child?
Are you talking about the woman they tried to manifest to come? Yes. And basically what happened there is that Jack Parsons was trying to manifest this Moon Child. He was trying to bring this perfect lover, and he was helping, we'll keep it family friendly. He was working his magic wand while Ron was, taking notes, and they were doing this working to try to bring this perfect woman into Jack's life, so she could be his partner and stuff. And they did succeed in manifesting this one lady that showed up, and her and Jack were doing really, really good, and everybody thought everything was all sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows. And then, well, L. Ron Hubbard stole his woman, and that's how that whole thing ended up.
That Hubbard, man, I'll tell you, what a womanizer.
So Ron was sly. Ron, I mean, one thing we know about the young L. Ron Hubbard is he must have had some game.
Well, and he had his own. How would you not have game if you had your own Navy fleet? I mean, what?
Well, this was before he had that. I mean, he was going up against a rocket scientist with a mansion, and he was able to talk that girl away out of the mansion and into some ratty ass car with him. So, I mean, if there's one thing the guy could do, it was talk and coerce and manipulate, I guess, if you're going to look at it from a dark point of view.
Well, no, I mean, that's a good point because Parsons was, he's a good looking dude. He's a rocket scientist. He's got all sorts of money. He reminds me of Tony Stark. I think
he was Tony Stark. You're exactly right.
So and if you look at, L. Ron Hubbard, I mean, he's not nearly as good looking as he looks. Kind of goofy. He kind of looks like one of those guys. You're like, well, I'm not sure about, that guy. He looks kind of goofy, man. He just, so the fact that he didn't have a lot of money and goofy looking dude to be able to do that, to take Stark's girl, that's pretty impressive. That's like taking Gwyneth Paltrow.
He did. He stole Gwyneth Paltrow. But the thing that people are going to bash me about Scientology. I'm not a Scientologist, don't want to be a Scientologist. If I thought Scientology was the way, I'd be a Scientologist. But I am convinced that one of the reasons that Scientology is the one religion it's okay to bash. Muslims are cutting heads off, but we're not allowed to bash Islam. But we can bash Scientology. And one of the reasons we can is because there's a lot of spiritual technology within that organization, really in the Dianetics, and Scientology has kind of bastardized it, but they don't want you knowing about great basic purpose. They don't want you knowing about making life a game. They don't want you knowing how to externalize and get outside your body. They don't want you knowing how to improve your communication greatly. They don't want you knowing all of that. They don't want you knowing about exchange in abundance, which means give more than you're asked to give. That's the way to perpetuate anything to be successful. And that's one of the reasons why it's bashed and lampooned, and why if your acting career is in the crapper, you can start talking bad about them and get your own TV series.
Well, so let's say that there's a few very powerful, influential, organizations in Hollywood. And I've heard that Scientology is actually one of them. And when you watch films like Oblivion, I feel like that's more Scientology based than some of the other films that we see that have different agendas. So I wonder, clearly now I think that there's got to be some alphabet agency connections into the Scientology mainframe. But I wonder if it was always like that. Do you think that when L. Ron Hubbard started his Navy fleet, do you think that he was actually working with the DOD, like Navy intel, secret ops kind of stuff?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. When Hubbard was in the Navy, and he did command 3 vessels, he wasn't in naval intelligence. He was kind of he wasn't in command of aircraft carriers, okay? He was in command of small ships, and he probably wasn't, the greatest captain. He didn't get promoted to admiral. But I don't think, to say that L. Ron Hubbard was deep within naval intelligence takes some real extrapolation and takes some real imagination. I don't see the evidence for it. I don't see the empirical data that he was in to naval intelligence. As far as the whole Scientology CIA thing goes, he started out this Dianetics. He was there with Napoleon Hill and Norman Vincent Peale, but he wasn't as good a businessman as those guys, and he didn't copyright a lot of his stuff, and people started stealing it from him. They started taking Dianetics and making it Bionetics or something like that, and taking all his stuff and getting people to follow them. So Ron says, man, I got to do something. People are stealing my stuff from me. And he decides that he's going to copyright it. And I believe he got bad advice from some people that say, hey, look, make it a religion. That way you won't have to pay taxes and you can still, keep it copyrighted. And Ron's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And he makes it a religion. They're telling him, don't worry about paying your taxes. We're going to get this religious status. It's very, very hard to get a nonprofit status. 501c3, 80% of them, you fail the first time and you got to go over and over. So Ron's not paying his taxes. All these years they're trying to get involved, with this 501c3 status. So people within the organization now start taking advantage of Ron and say, oh, look, dude, you better get on your boat and get outside U.S. territorial waters because the IRS is coming for you. And they took his his idea of Dianetics, and he was a bad businessman, bad judge of character, and he allowed this thing to get away from him. And Scientology is nothing like what Dianetics was. And it's very possible that there is something nefarious, as far as alphabet agencies going on with Scientology. But all that stuff is way over Ron Hubbard's pay grade, in my opinion. I think he was, a guy like, he would have had a YouTube channel if they had it back in the day. And he just wasn't a very good organizer. He wasn't a very good businessman as far as, keeping things in control. And it got away from him. And then the creepy, weaselly, David Miscavige was able to institute a coup and take over his whole thing. And it just completely, totally got away from him. And so it's kind of like you could draw an analogy. It was the thing that came through the portal, and it just blew past Ron. And before he knew it, he was on the run from the government, and really kind of a captive of his own creation.
How would one find out more information about the portal and that being that you're talking about? Like, where are the papers or docs on that? It's
so hard, Rex. There's very, very little written about it, and what was written, there's very, very little of it extant that, it's still existing. So it's literally hours and hours of internet search. It's hours and hours of microfiche search at a library. It's hours and hours of poring over books, and it doesn't yield a whole lot of information. That's why even after all that study, it remains somewhat speculative. But we do know that Ron and Tony Stark, Jack Parsons, were hanging out. We do know that they were doing a lot of magical with a K type of work. We do know that they tried to open a portal. We do know they say they did, but that's really all we know.
Now, in Dianetics, Jeff, do they talk, or does Hubbard discuss more on like mind exercises, anything based with hermetics or anything that's connected to old scriptures?
Yeah, basically what Dianetics is all about is realizing that you have a great and high purpose, realizing that you're a highly efficient spiritual being that is trapped within a meat suit, for lack of a better term. And it's all about, number one, going back through your life and healing and removing all of the traumas within your life, and then going into the womb and healing traumas that you suffered in the womb, and then going back into your past life and healing traumas in your past life. So Dianetics really is all about realizing your spiritual essence and your energetic being, and then working through that and freeing it from all of the, we want to call them archons, if we want to call them thetans, like they call them, but freeing ourselves from all of the baggage that is keeping us from being who we are supposed to be and being able to move on to our next stage of life and growth and development. That's really what it's all about in a nutshell.
One thing I'm interested to know about is the past life regressions that many people that go through certain sessions will say they have. And, whether it's a Star Wars past life, a Flintstones past life, or whatever, Jetsons. And, what happened, man? I wanted a Jetsons future. I remember the Jetsons cartoon, flying cars, waking up.
Here's George Jetson.
Yeah. What happened? We're in like Hellraiser meets Fringe.
His wife, Judy, or his daughter, Judy, whatever. Anyway, yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm doing a past life regression with someone almost every day now. And, I've done the odd ones over the years, but now doing it almost every day and being involved in them, I'm amazed, Rex, at how profound they really are. And whether or not you're actually going back to past lives, or you're just accessing repressed or recessed parts of your brain or your psychology, when you go back through it, and the way I do it, when people come across something that is traumatic or uncomfortable, we work through that, and we reframe it, and we get them happy about it. The most traumatic things in their whole life they'll now giggle about. And just going through that process, whether you're really going back into past lives or not, going through your past and getting rid of the traumas and understanding some of the base reasons for why things are happening the way they're happening to you. And in a way, we really are today a sum of our past and maybe even our past lives. So to be able to identify that and to be able to deal with it and to be able to understand it, I every day I am more amazed at how profound that exercise is. Again, whether it's a mental exercise or whether you're really going into past lives, it is tremendously helpful in your life.
So you help other people do that?
Every day, brother, literally almost every day now I'm doing at least one. I was doing up to 4 a day, but man, it just wears a brother out. So I've got to limit it to 2 a day, or I can't do my 6 videos to keep up with Rex, who's doing at least 7 or 8.
No, man, you're doing more videos than me, but and you're doing that too. So how does that work? Like, walk us through a session. Let's have some fun here for a minute. Why don't we should do a session now? We've got a ton of people listening in the live stream, and there's going to be a lot more people listening to this after the show. Could we do a session like that now? Do you have to have somebody on the other line, or can you just do it?
We can walk you through the mechanics of what a session would look like.
Awesome.
And it's funny because the first thing I will ask people, the first 2 questions I will ask are you afraid of elevators or are you afraid of escalators? And like, what? Because the technique that I use to get people to relax and get them, into a place where they can, access these memories is I, have them in an elevator and imagine the elevator going down, watching the floors, drop, drop, drop. And as the floors, as the elevator's going down, you find yourself relaxing more. You find yourself more comfortable. You find yourself in total control of your surroundings. You find yourself in touch with your feelings. Then we get out of the elevator, we go down an escalator, and we just go down a little bit more deeper, trying to, you almost can't even feel your body. It's there. You're in control of it, but you're really accessing who you are as a spirit and as a being. And then we walk through a door, and I start very simple. I say, you know what? What'd you have for breakfast today? And I have them imagine what they had for breakfast and see what you had for breakfast. See those. I was doing one yesterday with a girl that had lasagna for breakfast. I'm like, lasagna? But, see the lasagna, smell the lasagna, be the lasagna. What'd you have for dinner yesterday? Go back to dinner. Tell me a memory from the weekend that made you smile. Tell me a memory from high school. Tell me a memory from your childhood. And invariably, Rex, one of these memories that they will access is a painful memory. And we'll take some time and we'll work on that memory so it's not painful anymore. And we'll actually get it to a place where, like this person I talked about yesterday, it was a kind of an abusive situation. And it was really limiting this person in their relationships. And by the time we were finished working with that memory, they were giggling about it. It's that powerful. And it's that. And then we'll try to go into the womb and see if people can pick up stuff there. And amazingly, they can. And then once they've seen that and they felt that, I have them kind of do like a little clap of their hands and say the first thing that they see. And, some people will see space, some people see horses, some people see cannons, but typically there's some flash of insight to a past life will come. And then we go into that. Okay, you saw a cannon. Is it like a Civil War cannon? Is it a World War II cannon? What is it? And then they see the cannon, they back off. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? And we work through that whole scenario and try to look around and get, markers of what time, kind of what year is it? What age is it? And I've had some people go, we've been all the way. I haven't been back to Anunnaki times with anybody, but we've been back in Egypt and places like that. And it was funny because for the first maybe a month I did it, everybody was a pharaoh, everybody was a queen, everybody was a king. But now I'm working with people that are more realistic. And I mean, we've had people that were horse thieves and people that were, kind of the equivalent of janitors and the king's court and just people with normal lives. But the thing. It's fun and it's cool to be able to go back and experience past lives. But the best part of it is that you're able to understand motivations. Like this one person I worked with, they believed, and I get involved with them and I kind of see it too, that they were, a Native American person that got slaughtered by, white people just for being Native American. And all of a sudden, this person realizes, well, that's why I'm such a rebel. That's why I hate authority. That's why I question everything. That's why I can't even hardly go to work, because I don't want somebody telling me what to do in a derogatory fashion. So it helps you understand where you've been and then leverage all that information to be more effective where you are, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it's like you're unlocking certain parts of the subconscious, and that absolutely makes sense. You're connecting dots.
Exactly, Rex. And it may not be past lives. I happen to think that it probably is, but it may not be. It may just be recessed or repressed areas of your consciousness, and you're unlocking them. And now you're able to leverage and make it a strength instead of, turn it into a motor instead of an anchor.
Right on. Now, also tell us some more about, okay, so you've read 18 books by L. Ron Hubbard.
I've read the 18 basic books. I haven't read any of his fiction, but I've read the 18 basic books of Scientology. Yes.
So, man, share the intel.
And Tom Cruise touched those books.
Right on. So you could actually make a voodoo doll now of Tom Cruise.
I probably could make a Tom Cruise voodoo doll right now.
And you could be like tickling his feet while he was on another Oprah Winfrey show. Remember that when he jumped on
jumping on the couch? I love this woman. Yeah.
And they just totally smeared his name. I thought it was funny when he did that, but anyway.
Yeah. And incidentally, I did see Tom Cruise here in Clearwater about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't actually talk to him. He was in his car. I was in my car, but he went out of his way to be very nice, very cool, very funny for the 30-second interaction we had. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like I said, one of my favorite movies, and he was in it, is that one Oblivion, because I think there was just so many connections there with parallels, what we could be going through now or here in the near future. But talk to us about these 18 books, man. I mean, where do we start? Like give us some names. Let's go through this.
Names of the books?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to name every single one, but just talk to us about some of them that first comes to your mind, and then we'll walk through it, because I didn't know he had that many books that weren't fiction.
Oh, absolutely. And there's hundreds of books, and you can't see me, right? I'm not on camera.
You've been on camera this whole time.
Have I really?
No.
Oh, okay.
There's 15,000 people listening right now, and you've been on camera the whole time. You didn't know it.
Well, the book one is Dianetics, but it's basically a very systematized layout. Dianetics is like 700 pages, and it kind of has everything in it. And then his other books start kind of breaking down into pieces on that. Like, okay, one of them teaches you how to, really how to get out of your body. Everybody's like, how do I astral project? And number one, why do you want to astral project? But there's a whole system about how you can actually begin to start externalizing your spirit. And the whole goal of it is not so you can get out and have sex with Scarlett Johansson in the astral realm. The whole idea of it is you can realize that you're not this body. You are a spiritual being that is capable of leaving this body, and this body is just a vehicle that you're in. So, I mean, like Dianetics 55, it just breaks down a little bit. Science of Survival goes back to the very beginning of, and it's very, you're reading Sitchin right now. There's a lot of, and I've got, There Were Giants Upon the Earth, which is sitting right next to this L. Ron Hubbard book, but it goes back to the very beginning and, talks about, how we got here, at least in his view, from, other civilizations, and why we have the motivations that we have to survive, and, what drives us, what are the basic drives, and, why are they there? He has a whole book about ethics, and it's about he has this profound philosophy called exchange and abundance. And just real quick, if you give me $1, Rex, and I give you $1 worth of work, that's a balanced exchange. If you give me $1 to do some work, and then I go and play video games and don't do anything, then I've ripped you off. But at best, most people, all we ever get is that balanced exchange. We don't want to do any more than what we're paid to do. But he has this concept of exchange and abundance, which means if we're talking about past life regressions, let's get as an example. I don't say you got to give me $50, $75, whatever. I say you give me a donation, and we do the past life regression, and then people give me what they think it was worth to him. And that's an exchange in abundance. So people can say, I've had people give me $200. I've had people give me $40. But the point is, I'm doing it to be excellent to you. It's more than just a little silly, phrase. I'm doing it to be excellent to you, and then they're being excellent back to you. And it's so synergistic. It's just the way the world is supposed to work. Then there's a whole book that talks about how to go through your own life, identify the past and experiences that aren't constructive for you, how to deal with them and move on. And then there's books about how to be more effective at work. There's books about how to be, more effective in relationships. I mean, he's got this whole concept about communication. You've got to have, it's just profound. And if you do it, and he's got this whole sales cycle too, that's just amazing. You can use in whatever you do. And again, I'm not trying to promote Scientology. None of it is original. It's all stuff that he's cobbled together from other places. But this is one of the reasons why it's okay to bash it, because there's so much profound information there that can really change your life. But to be honest, Rex, it's not Scientology information. It's not Dianetics information. You can get this information from other places. It's just he has, done a fairly good job of synthesizing it and putting it in a pretty workable system of going from A to Z. So anyway, you asked, I answered.
That's a lot of reading. I mean, 18 books just by L. Ron Hubbard. And then does he ever get into stuff that you would consider to be more like, anything pagan, hermetics, philosophy, Gnostic philosophy? Does he talk about stuff? No. Let me ask
all of the above. He talks about everything but Papa Smurf. I mean, literally, he comes from all genres across all type of isms and theologies. It's really just Scientology means, a search for truth, literally. So he's just trying to cobble together all this vast amount of information that he's got. I mean, the guy when he was alive, he was like a John Gruden, the football coach. He only slept like 3 or 4 hours. So he's worse than you and me. He was out there reading and studying for 21 hours every single day and writing, literally thousands of books. So this is kind of a boil down of all this information that he found. And I'll tell you what, yes, he was probably crazy. Yes, modern Scientology is as dangerous as a snake and you should run from it. Yes, a lot of it is, there's a lot of mind control and terrible things going on in Scientology. But I'll tell you this, in those 18 basic books, there's some stuff that is good, that is life-changing, and that I've been able to use to help other people change their lives. So if I have to put up with some nonsense every now and then, guess what? If I have to throw out a bone, I'm okay eating the good meat around it.
Absolutely.
I mean, have you ever had ribs?
A few times. A few times.
I don't eat meat anymore, so that's kind of a bad analogy, but
no, good for you. That's awesome. I'm doing my best to get to that level, but I still every once in a while, like yesterday, I went to a Brazilian steakhouse that was divine. They just kept bringing out different cuts of meat, and it was delicious. But
Rex, let me bring something weird to you, okay? Just something real weird on that fact. Yeah. I would love to be 100% vegetarian. I really would. I've been vegetarian for 2 years, but I just never felt optimal. And I do this book about serpents and doves, and we really were created as a reptilian human hybrid. And I'm just wondering, I wish it wasn't true. I wish it wasn't real. And I know vegetarians and vegans are going to tell me it's not, but something in my mind says, because we have the reptilian DNA and because we are a reptilian human hybrid, do we need some amount of meat in our diet to be completely 100% optimal? And how do we get meat that we know doesn't have all that virus and crap in it you were talking about earlier? So anyway.
Well, heck, I wonder, I did a podcast on this earlier today, and this is when the audio went to shit, doing a live show in the last 4 minutes. When I started really diving deep into the archons, the DNA stuff, it just went haywire. So I wonder if we were at one point in time like food for this serpent race. Like, what if they made us for food, or like they looked at us just like we would look at a good steak, and maybe in some levels they still do. I don't know, but
I think absolutely, Rex. They do it energetically. We're cattle, and to some of them, we're literally cattle, and it's like, we're sheep, and they really are eating us energetically and sometimes physically. I mean, they are kind of like Hannibal Lecters.
Soylent Green is people.
Soylent Green is people. And if you've never watched the Hannibal TV series, my brother, you got to watch it. I think it's the best thing that was ever put on television. Creepy, but man, it's really done well, and it gives you some stuff to think about.
I don't know if I could handle it, man. That stuff freaks me out nowadays. It's like there's somebody that I'm close to that you would think was like a librarian. She's got the librarian mindset, like an older librarian that would never even watch anything close to Dexter. Well, she's going through like this Dexter marathon right now.
Dexter was great.
Man, I'm telling you, that's spooky. But
it was so funny too. But I mean, the thing about Hannibal is it'll give you some ideas about us being meat to the powers that be.
Sure. Absolutely. Let's, if we can, before I forget, this is one question that I've wanted to ask, because I would love to get to our origins. And even though I feel like the Anunnaki did influence us to where we are now, I wonder, what was it like on Earth 50 million years ago? What was it like 500 million years ago? What was it like 5 billion years ago? And I wonder if beings were just initially created like via formation versus a single cell. What were they like? Were there space wars in the past? Were there lion people? Were there eagle people? I've heard that Hubbard, or supposedly in some of the writings that Hubbard did, I don't know if this was maybe his fiction stuff, talks about wars from 50 million years ago and stuff, and even longer than that, and some type of fate, and like hundreds of millions or billions of these things that came out of a volcano or something like that. Am I even close?
What Hubbard's, his woo-woo theology, beyond just the science of the mind and working with your mind and dealing with these things, when he gets down to talking about where these, attachments, he calls them thetans, came from, it basically, and I know you had Andy on the other day. He was an interesting guy. I'm trying to get in contact with him, but basically Hubbard views that Earth was kind of like an Australia, and these alien races brought the undesirables here to Earth to kind of, put them like Australia. It was a prison camp, and for some reason they decided to put them around all these volcanoes, and they decided to blow up the volcanoes with nuclear bombs, and that disembodied all of these undesirable people. And now what we deal with on a daily basis that is not conducive to helping us live a better life is some type of an attachment from these disembodied thetans that were brought here and, their bodies blown up. So they're just kind of floating around. So it's the same exact thing, as an archon. It's the same exact thing as a demon. It's the same exact thing, as a spirit attachment. But in Hubbard terms, they were undesirables from the universe that were brought here to a prison planet, if you will, disembodied, and now they're kind of swirling around. And we have the misfortune of, being born into an environment where if they see a weakness, they'll come in and attach themselves to us. So really, when you get down to the nitty gritty, I don't know if you ever saw Nacho Libre, but getting down to the nitty gritty, these thetans are floating around and they've attached themselves to them. And the Dianetic system is supposed to tell you how to identify them and get yourself free of them.
Now, how long ago, how many millions of years ago did this volcano thing happen? This explosion?
He talks about billions and billions. I don't remember the exact number, to be honest with you.
Okay. I think of the Zechariah Sitchin translations where the Anunnaki wanted to change the terraform the planet because of the atmosphere.
What are you thinking about Sitchin, by the way? I know you just started reading them.
Love him. The guy's brilliant. Absolutely love his work. And much of what he writes about, what's so funny is I have been doing podcasts about the stuff that he's writing about in his book, The 12th Planet. Like a lot of his references are Sumerian cuneiform tablets that have been translated via Oxford University that I've been reading, those same stories that he is connected to the Anunnaki and the space travel and the Nephilim, the giants from Nibiru. And the only thing that I haven't been able to verify is this 3,600 year cycle yet. Now, I think you did a good job connecting.
You're talking about the orbit of Nibiru, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not convinced on that. I will, by any means, but I will say that I'm impressed with the 12 planet theory, or the 10th planet and the sun and the moon, because if you think about the 12 months, if you think about the pantheon, how there's always got to be 12 gods and these demigods in the 365 days of the year, like back in Sumerian times, 12 months, 12 hours in the morning, 12 hours at night,
12 disciples.
12. Yep. 12 disciples, Jesus, 12 zodiac signs. There's so many connection points there that there could have very well been. Well, 12, I know there was a
12 playmates of the month in every year.
Hello, every year better be. So, yeah, right. So, but it's amazing how there absolutely no question was a 10th planet. Now, the question is, does it orbit every 3,600 years, and will it cause another catastrophe? Because there's been all sorts of discoveries of other planets recently that are right outside the Kuiper Belt. And they actually found one that is just barely outside the Kuiper Belt, about the size of Mars recently.
And who knew the Kuiper Belt was so wide?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So with that being said, I wonder how much these thetans and how much parallels there could be with some of the Sitchin stuff. Yet Sitchin, talks about this happening not anywhere near 1 billion years ago. So, but time, then you think about time, and time could be irrelevant. I mean, what we're doing right now, it could be like Neo in the second Matrix, where he's talking to the architect, and the architect's like, you've already been here 347 times, or I don't remember how many times. And he's like, you've said this before, and this has happened before. And so time could be another perception in this matrix that we're in. And we could have done this a trillion years ago, for all we know.
And may do it again. I mean, it seems to me like time may very well not be linear, and time is just like a frequency, and all the time that's ever been or ever will be is right around us, and we just have to learn how to tap into it. And there's other people that have learned how to tap into it, and then there's other people that have learned how to take us back and forth across time, and that's probably what happened to Paul McCartney.
Paul is fall. Did you see the facial recognition stuff on him?
I did. What I really blew my mind and started me down the rabbit hole was the Italian forensic study that showed that there are significant physical differences between Paul McCartney pre-1968 and Paul McCartney post-1968 that cannot be accounted for by plastic surgery. How did it happen?
It was he was sniffing swamp gas.
Concentrated swamp gas.
Yeah, it was some powerful stuff. So I think, I can't remember if Paul was right-handed or if Paul was left-handed, but there was so in Japan, something happened in Japan where Paul, just about 7 years ago, had to spend an extra week out there or something, because they were trying to validate. I don't know. So I'll have to look it up again. But another thing that makes you go, But
yeah, I haven't been able to find the data on that they said his fingerprints didn't match from an earlier visit. I've heard it a bunch of times, but have you actually found objective, verifiable data on that, Rex?
No, because when I heard about it, I didn't do enough research into it like I would now.
Yeah.
At the original time. But this is something I could definitely get into. I want to do a program on this because. And we could even talk about it now, because you know a lot about some of these entertainers, and we've got a huge crowd here with us. So,
well, I'm actually coming up on Coast to Coast in August to talk about Elvis and Paul being victims of MK Ultra, Tavistock mind control, and the severe mental trauma and perhaps even temporal trauma resulting in, Elvis becoming a movie puppet and Paul going from the high frequency good guy to the LSD chugging post Sergeant Pepper, not so much enlightened anymore guy.
Drinking vials of acid, playing with mannequin parts and the inside cover. How bizarre is that? If you really think about it, at the time, people wouldn't even think about this. And you really have to go back and look at it. You open up the inside of that cover, and this is when Paul was Paul, I think. And they were holding baby parts, but they weren't baby. They were mannequin babies, And it was like a ritual that you would see, similar to a podcast I did earlier where the Aztecs would sacrifice people, cut them up in a bunch of parts, and have these cannibal rituals with their.
And it was all fake bloody too, right?
Yeah.
Which album? That wasn't Sergeant Pepper, was it?
No, Sergeant Pepper was the one where they actually, if you play certain songs backwards, it'll talk about Paul dying in a car crash, and it'll show Fall in, you know, different clothes than the rest of them, and the way he's walking away. That there's a ton of stuff showing that, you know, they were throwing it in our face that he died. So I think that what happened was, I think they took him out intentionally, and they put in that plant with this, you know, CIA, because, or some type of organization like the CIA, because that person could now not only get tons of insider information on virtually everybody. I mean, imagine how much insider information he'd get on the drug trade and, you know, people connected to that and certain very influential people. But then he could play ball. And, you know, I've wondered this also before. You've got these huge alternative media platforms like Alex Jones and others that have over 2 million subscribers, which is big. But then you've got entertainers that sing songs that have 50 million or 20 million subscribers. So the influence that entertainers have is far beyond the reaches. And then you and I were talking about hypnosis earlier. And a good entertainer will put somebody in instant hypnosis, and those words go directly to the subconscious. Half the time people sing and they don't even know what they're singing. And even though they're singing along with the words, they don't really know what it means.
And that's a huge point, Rex. It does bypass your conscious, rational mind and go directly into your subconscious.
Right. So with that being said, then you've got the 27 Club, where tons of entertainers that were really, really good, dozens of them, have died at the mysterious age of 27 under very peculiar circumstances. They might have been MK Ultra victims as well. I wonder how many people in the entertainment industry, very good sports stars, people that are like cutting, you know, for example, was it Venus Williams or Serena Williams that has multi-personality disorder?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Venus. And she's literally multitudes of people in her one body.
Oh,
because
wow.
If you have multi-personality disorder, like really truly have it, you don't know personality A from personality B.
Well, I have seen that whole transformation that Beyonce goes through to become Sasha Fierce before she goes on stage, and that's pretty damn scary.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, Google that. It'll blow your mind. I mean, it really looks like maybe she's just getting in the zone. I don't know the sister, but it sure looks like something's taken over.
You think they actually signed contracts like with blood when certain people in the industry that literally have to come out and say, oh yeah, I sold my soul to the devil, like Roseanne Barr. Here's the thing about Roseanne Barr. She comes out on a talk show, says she remortgaged her soul because the famous she said she remortgaged her soul. And that was when she was getting popular again. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Yes. So Roseanne Barr says, oh yeah, you know, when I was a little girl, I wanted fame so bad. I said, what do I got to do to get fame? I sold my soul to the devil. And then I lost popularity after a while. So I said, devil, what do I got to do? Well, I remortgaged my soul to the devil. And she's wearing the red gloves and the red clothes. And so I'm watching that. And my parents were visiting a few months ago from out of town, and we're watching this. And I said, look at this. And my parents were like, oh, she's just joking. She's just kidding. I'm like, you really think she's kidding around? Yes, it's just a publicity stunt. Well, what about all the people that come out and say they sold their soul to the devil? And then you see people like Jack Black, which, don't get me wrong, the guy is incredibly talented. But who's that dude that he is with in some of those movies that looks like a bald kind of creeper dude? And they were on a talk show once, and no disrespect, I'm sure. Okay, maybe the guy's, you know, very handsome, whatever. The guy looks kind of creepy. And they're on the talk show.
Aleister Crowley looking weirdo, creepy guy.
I mean, he makes Aleister Crowley look super handsome. And he said, what do they say? Oh yeah, you know, we sold our soul to the devil. How else do you think we got here? And they started doing the devil sign. And I thought to myself, really, how else would people like that get to that position? Without doing something serious? They must have made somebody happy or signed something on the dotted line.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it and you look at it, and I think it's at least certain that some people believe that they have sold their soul to the devil, and that there's a devil personality or devil personage out there that will work those deals and work those contracts to make it easier to, to control someone here in this life, and also to direct them, into their controlling soul farm in the afterlife as well. But whether or not it's, irrevocable, whether or not you can't get out of it ever, I'm not sure, because I really think you do remain sovereign, you remain free. And my only thought about this is, if there is somebody out there that has done it and they regret it, I think that there is hope that they shouldn't just go kill themselves and say, I've already sold my soul to the devil, all's lost. I think that you can probably still get some help, so don't give up hope.
Right. And it makes me think also, maybe some of these entertainers that weren't playing ball, if they did sign a contract, if they signed it thinking, this is no big deal, I just, oh yeah, it's a joke, I was selling my soul to the devil, whatever. And then they realize that they did, and they don't play ball. Maybe sometimes you hear about the star whackers. That's what happened to them. They didn't play ball, so that's the price that the entertainment industry, man. Here's the deal, folks. You want to sign a contract with the entertainment industry, you better be damn good your whole life, because look at these weird, bizarre circumstances of musicians that die under very bizarre scenarios where it's like, well, the record sales aren't as good. What do we do? Oh, let's whack them. Record sales.
And it's not like you can quit. It's Tony Soprano. You join this little thing we got here, you're in for life. It ain't like you can just get out, I mean, you're in.
Right.
You're in.
So, I mean, it's just, it makes you wonder. And then nobody's ever caught. It's always just a suicide. It's always just a shotgun shell to the back of the head under 1,000 pills suicide. Some weird, bizarre circumstances that don't sound like suicides, yet they call them suicided. I'm using that as a figure of speech. It's just, it's creepy, man. And then stuff happens in movies that will happen in the media, in the news, a month later, a week later, a year later, whether it's a staged event or not, whether it's sizzle magic or a planned event or a combination of both. And it's always a conspiracy. Nothing ever happens at the top levels. Nobody ever gets arrested for it. It's all just a suicide. It's all just natural circumstances. And I wonder how much of this is staged, how much of this is made up, how much is the media just spinning it? And then sometimes you just ask yourself, what's real, what isn't? Well, I'm here talking to you right now, and that's real. So I guess we can at least think about that on the bright side.
In Wrexham, we got a lot of people out there that aren't even smart enough to sell their soul to the devil. They're selling their soul on the cheap, doing this stupid, ridiculous, dangerous, the dumbest thing I've ever heard, this blood over intent. Have you heard about that?
No, what's that?
These idiotic people will do a sigil and they'll do a mantra, and then they'll bleed their own blood, like Ben Stiller said in Dodgeball, and they put their blood over this statement of intention, and it's supposed to make it work a whole lot more, man. But yeah, you're making a blood contract, you dummy.
Wow, they're literally inviting serpents, those archons, into their life when they do that, and they don't even realize it. That's fascinating.
And they're not even getting guaranteed stardom out of it. If you're going to sell your soul, at least hold out for a good price, you chucklehead.
Write up a good contract, man. Read the fine print. Maybe lease, maybe offer a lease, but to sell it, man, I don't know. How expensive is it going to be to buy it back? That's crazy.
Ooh, just the stupid things that people do.
Well, I got to tell you, Jeff, I love where you're going with your YouTube channel. Your books are awesome, and I can't wait to see you on Coast to Coast. If you would, for the audience, give a couple shout outs so if people want to contact. I mean, do you do some of these sessions with people also? You just talked to me about, you say you do it everything, like people that actually call you, or is it just your friends? Or
no, actually, and if you want to find out about everything about me, the easiest, best place is just go to Jeff Daugherty Show YouTube or Christian Whistleblower YouTube. Just Google it, you'll find it. And everything, all of my heresy is in one-stop shop right there on YouTube. And yes, I literally do every day. I'll do 2 appointments. If people want to work with me, all they have to do is contact me through YouTube, or you can, click to message me there, or you can send me an email at christianwhistleblower@gmail.com.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, just in a couple of months, it seems like your YouTube channel has almost doubled. So that's fantastic. I see it doubling again here in the next month or so, and just keep compounding, man. This is great. You're rocking and rolling. I love your shows, and thank you, Jeff, for coming on, man. You're a great guy, and let's do this again.
Absolutely, Rex, and thank you for all of your help and support. You're definitely one of the good guys in this movement. If you're wondering if Lex, if you're wondering if Rex, if you think Lex is real or not, he is. Trust me, this is a good guy. Subscribe, like, share, and check him out.
Right on. Folks, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. This was a huge crowd. Be excellent to each other. Thank you, moderators, for keeping things civil. Question everything, folks. Be excellent to each other like Bill and Ted are, and be the change you want to see.
Just recently was that this guy, this poor bastard that we're looking at this picture here, this Patsy, this Didymus, this twin, that he may have actually signed some type of a contract with them, entered into some type of agreement to be this Messiah figure. And is he, Rex, and your great audience, being crucified over and over and over again? Is he being harvested over and over and over again? Is he in this perpetual loop of sacrifice that happens every time there's a Catholic mass or a Christian communion? And when you look at this picture, I don't know about you, but it looks for the world to me like a dude trapped in a soul farm that's being cannibalized infinitum.
Man, you want to hear something even more spooky? Is this is actually connecting an experience that I had that I've shared with you and the audience about how I felt like I was Archon food once, like how I felt like I was literally a part of some type of entity that was feeding off of me. And then all of a sudden I was connected to other people, and I felt like I was in a stadium and I could only be allowed to move when it was my turn. And I'm looking at this image and I'm kind of feeling the same thing. And it's pretty spooky because I certainly don't believe everything that I hear from the Farsight Institute, far from it, but there's certain times that I feel that they hit the nail on the head. And there was this one, and I love Dick Algier and Daz Smith. Those guys are great, really nice people. Very, very, very good at remote viewing, probably some of the best in the world. Courtney Brown, last time I had him on the show, he said some things that really kind of made me go, really, dude? But, and it wasn't about, it was about the way that, how do I put it? Like, he basically said that he lied to them and lied to other people about these things, doing these sessions because people couldn't know what they were looking at until afterwards. And then he made it sound like if you were a white person, then you shouldn't be into remote viewing anymore, because now it needs to be for other people. And first of all, who cares what color you are? I mean, it was just bizarre the way you go back and listen to the podcast. You'll know what I'm talking about. Like, even people left comments like, what's wrong with Courtney, man? Where's he going with this? I think he was just trying to reach a different audience, because a lot of people, I guess, that are into remote viewing and stuff like that, I guess, have white skin. Heck, I don't know. I mean, I figured there were people of all skin color that liked remote viewing, but it was just a real bizarre interview. And I'm not trying to knock the guy by any means, but why would you say that? Oh yeah, I lied to him. And then anyway, so yeah, let's get into.
Sounds like the Apostle Paul. I caught you by guile. I lied to you to get you in, and now I got you. And just a thought popped in my head. If you look at this picture, think back to the movie poster of Constantine.
Right, and real quick, the reason I brought up Farsight Institute is they did a remote viewing session on Jesus. And it wasn't it wasn't Jesus that actually died. It was somebody else, exactly like what you said. That's why I brought up Farsight Institute.
I love people that agree with me, Rex. Feel free to bring it up anytime.
I mean, here's what I think. And you know what? This last interview that I guess I was just talking to myself. It wasn't really an interview. I was doing a podcast. I was interviewing myself. Hey, Rex. Hey, buddy. So Ozzy, there was this, I was talking about the serpent archons and the DNA, and then I was linking it to Resident Evil and the T virus. And then I was thinking about bacteriophage, how they will actually create genetically designed viruses, spray it on meats and shellfish and stuff to get rid of the E. coli. And what happens is the viruses will literally release their seed. They will hook up to these bacteria, and then they'll spit out into the bacteria and then grow a whole bunch of themselves, self-replicate, and kill the bacteria. Well, there is a T4 virus. It's called the T4 model is what they call it. And it's literally patented. Most foods that have it don't even have to label it. It's considered something that doesn't need to be labeled because it's considered all natural, which is bizarre. But to make a long story short, they call it a T4 bacteriophage. T4 is the same virus in Resident Evil that turns everybody into zombies. Then you've got the Will Smith movie. What was that came out? Where I Am Legend. I Am Legend, where they cured cancer with a genetically designed virus, but then at the same time that turned people into zombies.
Good news, bad news.
Yeah, so it's like we're at the cusp right now where they can create. And by the way, the HIV virus looks almost identical under a microscope to the bacteriophage that is sprayed on cold cuts, on meats, on sea fish, on shellfish, etc. And you don't even know it, ladies and gentlemen. That you hear about the mad cow disease and stuff like that, where people's brains start eating themselves. The brain starts getting eaten by some weird fungus or something like that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it could be some rogue bacteriophage. So maybe this Archon interface, where am I going with this? Maybe this Archon interface that could have permeated through not only Enki and Enlil and the Anunnaki that manipulated us with their DNA, so therefore we would be infected as well with this Archon type interface, this serpent Archon. Maybe it's something similar to bacteriophage. Like maybe our DNA is the Archon.
Wow. Maybe. And, just from maybe more of a less biological take on it and more of a energetic spiritual take. In Genesis 1:21, it talks about the King James says the great whales, but if you get down in the original Greek, it's the majestic serpent, that upright humanoid reptilians created in Genesis 1:21. Man's not created down until Genesis 1:27. We don't know how many, thousands of years potentially are between Genesis 1:21 and 1:27. And these majestic serpents were a being like we were originally created, with great spiritual ability.
So with that being said, Constantine, man, that was a serious battle as well. And you were you were a minister, so the secrets and stuff like that to get people into that hypnotic state. So if you would, for the audience, talk about some of those dirty little secrets that churches use to get people into that mind control state to where they want to give more money up to the church.
Right. And, that has to be stated that it's not, every single church that's doing it, because to be frank with you, a lot of them don't have the training and don't have the expertise to do it. So you may go to, second, third, fourth, fifth Baptist church, down the street that's got, 30 or 40 people, and you might not experience this. But if you go to any church that's probably more than 200 or 300 people, you're going to notice the same exact formula that is being played out on every service. And the reason it's being played out is because it's very, very effective at bringing people into a stage of trance. And it doesn't mean like they're automatons, they can't control themselves, but it's a light state of trance, which it makes people highly susceptible to suggestion. And it also creates a huge group think, and it's all focused on the vibes that the ministers and the worship team really want to put across. And it starts, from the time you walk into the building. The colors are very similar, the setups are very similar. You've got beautiful surroundings. You've got everything set just so, and it starts. I mean, this is a good example right here. It kind of draws you right to the platform. You've got the music going as you walk in, and the praise and worship service really is the thing that sets the table for them to start eating their energetic meal off of you. Because you go in, and actually King David, who I think there's some decent evidence might have been a golem. But anyway, King David wrote, you enter into his gates with thanksgiving. So they always start you off, Rex, clapping your hands, you're juking, you're jiving, you're dancing around, you're having a good time. You enter the gates with thanksgiving. and then you move into praise. They step it down just a notch, and it's not so much bouncing around anymore. There's not so much dance, and you're kind of swaying, and you're moving a little bit deeper into trance, and you're singing the songs that are a little bit slower, and then they drop you down into worship. Thanksgiving, praise, and they drop you into worship. And worship is we've got our eyes closed, we've got our hands raised, we're deep into this light trance now, and we're weaving and we're singing, and that whole, you can just feel that energy, and you can feel that, people call it getting under the spout where the glory comes out, having your Holy Ghost Cheerios, and you get there and you just feel it. And the guys that do it really good, the guys that do it really well, they'll bring you to that place, your Thanksgiving, your praise, your worship. And then as soon as
Jeff, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. We're going live here in just a second. Stand by.
Yeah, I just saw the Leak Project is live on air pop-up.
Yeah, here we are. We're live now. All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have Jeffrey Daugherty with us, the Christian whistleblower, ex-minister, over 20 years with the church. He's even been a part of exorcisms, and we're going to talk about a few of the Vatican's dirty little secrets and several other religious institutions that make a killing off of you, ladies and gentlemen, after they hypnotize you. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about Dianetics. And I'm going to pick Jeff's brain big time about L. Ron Hubbard, who he was as a person outside of the CIA front that I feel has infiltrated the church. Maybe it was already infiltrated at the beginning. Maybe he was doing Navy intel with the military at the beginning, but it certainly seems like now more than ever, there's a lot more control in that institution. But first of all, what is up with the Vatican? If you go to the Vatican, you can see this bizarre statue of Jesus where it looks like he's got a serpent head, like a snake head. And Jeff brought something up off the air that we're going to talk about right now, about what else this looks like. So, Jeff, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great, Rex. Glad to be with you. Always a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for getting up. I know that you got about 3 hours of sleep. You do more podcasts than me, so I don't even know how that's possible, but you do. And that's awesome. So, tell the audience what you saw and the epiphany that you had with this image.
Well, this is completely half-baked. I just mentioned it to you because I haven't had a chance to really study it out or get too much in depth of it. It actually just came to me a few minutes before we went on air. But I jotted down a couple notes, and the note I put down was perpetual patsy, sold soul for Jesus gig, ? Being killed and sacrificed over and over, ? Transubstantiation, ? So my thought was, and then you show me this image, from my research, the real Christ, the guy that was the Word, that was an Elohim and became flesh on earth, I think for 3-4 years, at least there in Jerusalem, he was not crucified. And that's pretty clear within the writings of the Gospel of John. The person that was crucified was called Thomas Didymus, or the twin. Looked like Jesus, he was a good patsy, and he got crucified. And I think, and I've written about this in some of my books, that they ran a huge super psyop mind game on him to where they actually warped him into believing that he was, the Son of God and a Savior figure. And what came to me is what happens is as soon as people are still worshiping, they'll usually walk up to the microphone, and that's when they'll start saying the most important thing they want you to know. That's when they'll take care of the most important part of business. And 99.9% of the time in the big churches, Joel Osteen style, all the way down to 200-300 members, what comes after Thanksgiving praise and worship comes the offering. It's time for money. Yeah.
Yeah, pay up. Your sins will be forgiven. This week, you better pay a little bit more because you were kind of bad last weekend.
And I saw there's a great parody website. It's called Babylon Bee. And I made a funny little video. It said, church puts ushers on commission, income goes up 40%.
Nice. What do you think about all these ancient tablets and scriptures that go all the way back ancient Mesopotamia. Like earlier today, I was showing this tablet that showed these giant reptilian dudes eating babies and eating pigs, and like they were picking up pigs like you would pick up a football. That was about the same size to them as well. I mean, they were just huge. And this tablet is thousands of years old. And I wonder, like, were they here first? Were they here before us? And if they were, maybe that's why this Anunnaki manipulation that took place on us, they don't like it. They never liked us in the first place. So I don't know, man. I'm really starting to question more and more every day with all this information that presents itself about these reptilian beings. And I mean, just look at the inside of the Vatican, for goodness sakes. It looks like a reptilian, like the inside of a reptile head, like a snake head. And they're found throughout the world. The Chinese, in Asian culture, in Middle Eastern culture, in Greece, in Rome. There's definitely an influence there.
Absolutely. In fact, my last book was called Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods, and it talks about this fact that the reptilian mythos, if you will, is ubiquitous in all of the great creation myths and in all of the ancient religions. And my question was, well, why isn't it in the Bible? And once you begin to look at Genesis in the original languages, you find out that, guess what? Boom, the reptilian mythos is highly present in the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis even shows that there was an upright reptilian hominid being created, wait for it, before Adam and Eve. So the first creation on this earth of a hominid humanoid type being was a upright reptile called in the scriptures the majestic serpent.
Well, and with the way we see the Vatican designed now, with the way that the serpent influence has been permeated throughout history, throughout cultures, does that mean that the serpents still control things at the top levels? Does that